Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Monday. It's July 20th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and it was all uphill today. It didn't look like it was going to be that strong early on. As you can see, we were really sideways, and we were still inside this overnight high, but we rocketed right on through that, pulled back and tested it a few times, and then we were off to the races. So really, you'd want to measure this first leg and then look for a possible measured move, which got us right in here where we corrected at before we even pushed up higher. But that got you really, if you use that target, that got you into the 2 o'clock hour, just kind of right on schedule. And of course, we did rocket on up a little bit more. And notice what happened here. Early on, I was looking at this channel and a possible range, but it turns out there's a flatter channel here, and there's two tiers, and we really inside of that we had this brown channel that held almost all of the rest of the day. There wasn't a lot of price action this afternoon. Notice really from about 11 o'clock to 2, that's all we had right there. And that little brown channel was really the play from, well, it got confirmed here about 11:40 or so, looks like on my chart. Maybe just right before lunchtime. And then that pretty much was the play the rest of the day. So into the 2 o'clock hour. This would have given you a nice target. Once we reached that, that would have been a nice place to exit if you got in early down here. There weren't a lot of chances to get in this move here, and then we got several here in the afternoon. But early on, if you didn't get in, if you got in down here, the great part is you might have caught a runner, especially if you caught this trade right here. You might have caught a runner, but it was really kind of hard to even catch a runner here. One of these probably would have caught one. I think this one would have, and I think this one probably would have. So catching runners was not easy today either. So, and there's not a lot of trades, so this is not going to take long today. But you can clearly see the two-tiered channel. And somebody else asked me when I found this. They said they didn't find this till late this afternoon after lunch. Well, really, you could have found it early on if you just kind of drew it off of these first swings. But until we broke higher here, I was not convinced that this channel was in play. But once we broke higher here, you had to assume there's a bigger pattern. And it really didn't come back into play. You can see it playing off that midline, but that doesn't really help you a whole lot. You really had to find the support here and then this channel, this brown channel here. And the only reason that's brown, the only reason just to distinguish so it's easier to see in there inside that blue channel. Otherwise, it means nothing. So keep that in mind. But yeah, this, you probably wouldn't have found this. Actually, I take that back. You could have found it as early as 9 o'clock or so. But until we broke higher here, I wasn't convinced this wasn't going to be a range day. So I didn't really look at it. Once we broke higher and just continued on going up here and came back and tested that breakout a few times and then kept going, then you had to assume there's something else going on. So you definitely should have had it by 10 o'clock or so. And again, it wouldn't have really helped you. You really just had to play this support and then the short-term channel. And that's why I'm always telling people send me their chart, and they may have one or two of these trends on here, and they don't have any of this short-term stuff. And you don't know what's going on if you don't put these on there. You've got to draw these trends, these real short-term ones. And they play out a lot of times just like a regular channel, a regular trend. Just like this one moving up, you got to close outside right here, move to a new high, and then it corrected, and you get a two-legged correction. So that was something else you probably wanted to do, was measure this right here, and then from that two-legged correction, measure right there, and that pretty much gets you almost to this next measured move. And actually, if you'd have probably tested it from here, or measured it from here to here, let's see what we get then. And the low point was right in here. And you can see that gets you real close. So either way you did those targets, they got you real close. So it didn't have to be exact. But let's back out here. We'll talk about these trades and we'll go from there. But it's pretty obvious there was strong support here. Look how many times we bounced right at that spot. Once you start to bounce at that same spot multiple times, you can pretty much trust that. Now on the upper side, that wasn't the case. We were bouncing at different places. But the overall trend was still up too. I mean, we'd been up here and we were just had this correction and it was starting to flatten out and turn back up. So there's a couple of choices here you might have gone short. I didn't mark them because I was looking for prices to come back to this trend line, or really actually this support resistance line, more than that trend line. I wasn't convinced that trend line was right, but I was waiting on prices to come back to here, and you're just not bouncing consistently. I'd probably draw this right about here. So there's a couple of options. There's a second entry short here off the high, and then there's another nice signal bar here. So those are both possibilities. I didn't mark them because the bias tended to be a little up, but they should at least be green. So let's just go ahead and mark them, because I'm sure somebody is probably going to ask me about them. But generally, if the trend is up, even when you go into a range, you want to be leaning towards the long side, not the short side. You got to be careful shorting sideways stuff if the overall bias is up. And you can clearly see from 2 o'clock on, I mean, this was up, and this is just all we're doing really here is correcting back down. And every time we bounced here, and then when we finally made that couple of higher lows, that was a good indication we're probably going higher. But let's talk about the trades. 7 o'clock came right in here on this high. There's actually a nice move higher here, a good bit away from the EMA. But that's just before 7. And then so right at 7 o'clock's coming right in here. So you're better off to wait on this lower high. And prices actually, your entry would be when it broke lower right here. Now if you're entering, let's say that prices open, they actually opened right here and then broke lower and then turned up and then came back down. So if you're entering on an engulfing bar like that, use the last high for your stop until this bar is complete, so you know where this high is. Because if you just throw it up here above this bar, you could get stopped out on a good trade. So if this bar is still forming and you're entering on an engulfing bar, go to the previous one. So your stop would have to go up here. And then when this closed, you move it 1 tick below this. Wouldn't have mattered. This trade would have worked out regardless. But that's just something we haven't talked about a whole lot. Because sometimes on these engulfing bars, it'll go both ways a couple of times. So, and of course, we bounce here off the main trend line. Then we get a higher low. You could consider entering here. And again, this broke lower first and then turned up. So it's another engulfing bar. But if you waited till here, you can't enter. It's just too close to the highs. It would have worked, but next time it won't work. So, but if your chart it broke lower and then turned and went out the upper side, you can go long right there. And you could even call that one blue, because we do get a little bit of a close outside here and then a move down. We don't quite make a new low, and then we try a low again. So, but there's clearly 2 legs of correction, and we bounced twice right off that key entry point. So my only problem with this big bar is that way up here, you're too close to the highs. And you don't want to be entering up here. If anything, you might look for a short, but you really don't get a good short setup. And then we push higher. And again, it's just not a very good setup to go short. There's no real good way to get in that move right there. And we work all the way back down here, and we find support again. Now, this is a double test of this level, but this was at 7, and you don't get this double test to almost close to 2 hours later. So I'd wait on a higher low here, especially since this was a little lower than this. And so, again, you could enter here, but it's a little bit aggressive. I'd wait on this one, and even this one is a little bit aggressive. It actually breaks lower and turns up. As long as you got enough room to get out, you're expecting prices to come back here, and we may just keep going higher. Because this is the first break of this original channel. And we don't know if this other channel has even been play yet. So we want to see it get confirmed over here, which it does right here. But this was a nice move, and then we already talked about this. This was not a consistent point. Yeah, we got a high here, but it's a first entry, second entry, and it is a second entry short. It's not a great signal bar on my chart, but if you had a better signal bar, you'd probably want to take that trade. Comes back down, then you get a second entry long. Now you got a good double test here, and you got a little move lower than that last one on that second entry with a nice bar, and that trend line's holding. That's the place to go long. And it comes back here, and you can see it. The trend line's coming into place, so it can't get back down here. And you got another second entry long. Notice that high, first entry, second entry. There's a high or low here, but not a very good setup. It's just getting congestive right there. But notice what happens. This is basically a double bottom here. So we're running up, and you try to go short once, you try to go short twice, it fails. If it breaks above here, generally it's going to rocket on up. And the main thing is you just need to have a little room to here, and you do have enough room to scalp out. This turns out to be a pretty good trade. It takes it a little bit of time to get going. There's actually another failed second entry short right here is where it is. Notice that low. First entry and then second entry, but you're just so far away from the EMA. You're right into the, you can see it right into that midline there. You may not get through there. It's just, it's just starting to, the longer you stay up here this far away from the EMA, the more chance there is it's going to fail on you eventually. So just wait. And a bunch of you got trapped right, I think it was right here. It didn't set up the same on my chart. I mean, there's no way you'd want to go short right there. But some of you were trying to get long right here. You had a little break higher. Notice you had one leg down, first entry, and then you shot below the EMA. This is just kind of in the middle of no man's land, and this is already played out. Notice that close outside and two legs up to a new high. You're going to get at least two legs down here. And while it's much harder to see, there's two legs. There's your first leg, and then there's your second leg. And we did go a little further, but there's still two legs down there. Notice we finally get a close outside here, and then we tried to go lower once, twice, and we fail. So you can go long right there on a failed second entry short. Runs up, it comes back. And this one you got to be a little bit careful of. But as many times as we've tested that, and a nice signal bar, but you still got that trend line right there, and you got to be careful going long into that. I really probably should have made this one green, but I took that trade personally, and I liked it. And I'm going to change it back to green. But notice you made that low right in here. You test it once, you test it twice, and you're getting rejection right there. And you got plenty of room back to the EMA. You're just looking for a scalp here. But you can't ignore that trend line. Same thing here. I know somebody went long right down here trying to pick a low or something, and it ticked just enough to stop them out. I guess this is where it was, because if you went long right there, your stop has to go below there, and you wouldn't have got stopped out on my chart anyway. I think most of you were going long right here on this. You had a second entry, which my second entry is not till way down here, and you can't use that for a signal bar. So it depends on what your chart looked like. But I know a bunch of you got trapped here. If you went long there, that wasn't a very good move. So notice you make another swing low right there. It's lower than that swing low. Try to go short once, you try to go short twice. So actually you technically go, your second entry short was right here. So, but when it comes back to that trend line, that's a second entry long too. And that's really all one move. So I treated that like a failed second entry short and a confirmation of that brown trend line. And you get a higher low here. I like that setup, but the problem is you got a lot of resistance. I don't have my line on there, but if you draw a line across there, there's some resistance, and you just have to be really careful going long right into that. That's a problem if you don't have enough room there, and you just don't have enough room. But instead, notice you got that new swing low, and you go short once, and you break up here, and you go short twice. But notice too, that's a first entry, second entry. The signal bar wouldn't be good enough for the second entry, but the fact that you got a failed second entry short, I don't have a problem taking that trade. And look, they thought the shorts were all trying to get short here, thought it was all over, and boom. And you know that was a good trap, because look at that bar. That shows you that it had people trapped. And then you come back here and you get a double test and another bounce with another second entry. Notice that first entry, second entry, right off the key entry point. And when you see the EMA and the trend line running together like that, that's confluence of two separate support areas, and that's usually a really strong trend. And you can see this was a strong trend this afternoon. Pay attention to that when you see the trend line and the EMA running congruently like that. So I like that entry. And plus it's a double test of this low. Notice you made that low, you test it once, you test it twice. Second entry long, double support there, double test. A lot of reasons to like that trade. And that took us into 2 o'clock. I didn't see anything after that I liked. Let me back out and show it to you again. But you really needed to find this brown channel, because otherwise you're sitting here waiting on it to come back here, and it never does. When you start to see this like this, you got to figure there's something new going on, something's changed, and there's probably another trend or some other pattern within this bigger pattern. And that's all it is. You just got a shorter term channel that is inside this bigger two-tier channel. And you can see this bigger channel still in play. Look at prices playing both sides of that midline. So it's still in play, but it's just not getting back to the trend line. That's showing some more strength as well. So this was a very strong trend this afternoon. It doesn't look like a strong trend, but when you back out and you see these little small shallow corrections and lots of dojis and stems on both sides, and the EMA pointing up, that's a strong trend. It doesn't look like it, but you can tell by how shallow most of the corrections are. That's probably the biggest correction we had all afternoon. That's the first break, and that's after 2 o'clock. But notice how none of these corrections, they're just, look how shallow they are. And bouncing right off that trend line. That's a good sign. When you see that with all those little bars and little dojis and lots of stems, and it just keeps going up or keeps going down, that's a strong trend. That's the same thing you got right here. This is a strong move up. So just remember that. That's an important piece that you need to be able to see. And I think that was about it. So we're going to wrap this up under 20 minutes here. So again, not a lot of trades today, a lot of green ones here, but you were better off just to stay with the trend, and the best trading was this afternoon. Usually of course, there's a few nice setups here early in the morning off the lows, but that was really about it. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap it up so we get this under 20 minutes. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. Hope you had a good trading day. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.